Hi, everybody. I hope you were able to get some refreshments during the break. I'd like to welcome you back. One thing I wanted to note, which I did not mention this morning, is that if you're looking to understand the flow of Climate Day, we do have printed agendas back at the Climate Collaborative table there, and those are quite helpful, and they actually share who's in the resource fair, what the flow of the day is, all of the speakers, so I highly recommend grabbing one of those. For those of you who just joined us, I'm Courtney Pinot. I'm the Executive Director at the Climate Collaborative, and thank you for being here with us. So today's session will run for 1 hour. We'll have plenty of time for audience Q&A. Please note that we are recording these sessions, so the sessions in this main ballroom will actually be live on YouTube, so there's something you can actually access in the future or share with colleagues who may not be here as well. So I'm thrilled to introduce our moderator for our next session. Katie Clark is a Climate Collaborative board member and a driven sustainability leader with 15 years of experience in purpose-led food businesses. Katie is currently the Senior Environmental Sustainability Manager at Chobani, America's #1 yoga brand, with a mission of making natural and nutritious food accessible to more people. Prior to Chobani, Katie led the sustainability program at Happy Family Baby Organics for 7 years, the #1 organic baby food in the US at that time. In her role as Director of Sustainability, she spearheaded the launch of a new line of baby products made with regenerative and organic ingredients and enabled the company to set a public-facing net zero by 2030 commitment, among several other notable achievements. Katie holds an MBA in Sustainable Business from the University of Oregon and a BA in International Development and Sociology from the University of California, Berkeley. With that, I would like to welcome our panelists to the stage. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a really great discussion in store, and I'm just going to do a little bit of context setting before I introduce our awesome panelists for today. So today we're talking about leveraging and building Scope 3 value chain partnerships for collective impact. And we know that engaging in Scope 3 reductions is essential for companies, yet many struggle with where to start. How do you build a credible program? What incentives drive meaningful reductions? What existing programs can companies leverage? In today's session, we'll tackle these key questions to help you navigate and enhance your Scope 3 engagement. We have a really interesting set of panelists today. We have a unique group of folks with representation from a distributor, a brand who is both a supplier of the distributor and who has suppliers of their own, and an organization working with suppliers to reduce, oops, where did my notes go? It's the problem with notes that look like this. Oh goodness, where did they go? Reduce downstream suppliers' emissions. It's going to be a great discussion, so I'm going to introduce our panelists to start. So first we have Benjamin Bartley. He's the Director of Responsible Procurement at United Natural Foods, Inc., the largest publicly traded distributor in North America. His remit includes UNFI's science-based target to reduce their supply chain emissions. Benjamin's career in value-based food systems includes verification of corporate climate action, development of regenerative agriculture insetting projects, value chain coordination at a member-owned food co-op, and directing a food access social enterprise. Benjamin has an MBA from Drexel University, a master's in ecosystem management and administration from Penn State, and lives in Philadelphia with his wife and daughter. At the very end here, we have Dr. Julie Kunin, who is co-lead of global sustainability at Oatly. In this capacity, she leads design and execution of the company's initiatives on regenerative agriculture and development of nature-based commitments and programming. Her passion for sustainability began with a PhD in archaeology, focused on indigenous agricultural practices. Dr. Kunin went on to hold roles in academia, government, USAID, nonprofit, Wildlife Conservation Society, freelance journalism, and business consulting before joining Oatly at the end of 2020. Dr. Kunin is also a writer on topics at the nexus of food, culture, and the environment for independent media outlets. She has been an awards judge for the James Beard Foundation, a fellow of the Explorers Club, and currently serves as a member of the board of directors of Food Tank and an advisor to the Culinary Institute of America for their master's program in sustainable food systems. In the middle here, we have Vincent Hoon, who brings extensive experience in the field of sustainability, climate, energy, regulations, and is a co-founder of Supplier Locked, a climate school providing suppliers the skills to progress through their climate journey, helping achieve their Scope 3 supply chain goals. As a director at Guidehouse, Vincent leads the sustainability disclosure and strategy themes and supports clients from strategy development to program implementation. His sector experience includes the food, beverage, pharmaceutical, life sciences, logistics, packaging, energy, and technology space. So really, really experienced and fascinating group of folks we have up here today. So I'd actually like to start with you, Vincent, for a little bit of context setting. So Scope 3 engagement is often one of the most challenging, yet one of the most impactful areas for corporate climate action. Could you just tell us a little bit about Supplier Locked and share your perspective on the imperative of Scope 3 engagement, especially in today's environment in the context of the US government's weakening stance on climate?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what was interesting was 2019, we didn't know that COVID was about to start, and we were working with a lot of companies on their target setting, so developing science-based targets, different types of targets, and a lot of those targets included Scope 3. So what we did is we performed a lot of maturity assessments of their, basically the climate programs of their suppliers. And time after time we were seeing that there was not a lot of maturity. We had a working session with companies including McCormick, PepsiCo, Mars, a couple of other large corporations, and in the supply chain we were seeing that there was huge potential for ultimately helping suppliers to establish a more advanced climate program. So that was kind of the moment in 2019 when Supplier Locked was born, and ultimately it's a program where you can see it as a climate school or accelerator where step by step we help suppliers to establish their climate program. So it's Scope 1 and 2 footprinting, Scope 3 footprinting, setting a target, developing an abatement program where we also very specifically look at agricultural related emissions, and then also how to share data with customers. So that was kind of that's the background of Supplier Locked. I'll share some more insights on program design later. And then I think there's a lot of relevance of the Scope 3 topic. We see that a lot of companies that have established a target, that those targets are starting to expire. That can be 2028, can be 2030, a little bit later. But those companies increasingly look at their suppliers to achieve their Scope 3 value chain target to basically drive the progress that they need to achieve their Scope 3 goal. And I mean, you're just asking this question so much going through my head, but a couple of other reasons why I think this will stay important is there was a recent publication in ESG Today about CFOs, and 500 CFOs were interviewed on if they think sustainability and sustainability programs will stay important within their organization, and they said yes, more than 70%. And what was interesting is that they talk about benefits. So it included ultimately more revenue and sales. I imagine that also has to do with those customer dynamics, that if you have a program in place, it increasingly enables a better relationship with your customers that value sustainability. But they also mentioned risk management, and that in a way relates to that there are policies in place in certain markets like Europe, here in California. So I keep seeing those as major drivers ultimately for the relevance for Scope 3 as well.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. And we heard a lot about risk management on the previous panel as well. I think that's going to be a theme throughout the day. So you spoke about customers and their interest in sustainability. Benjamin, I want to turn to you next. UNFI plays a unique role at the intersection of the food system, connecting suppliers and retailers. And you've been working on ways to engage suppliers to reduce their emissions. Can you share a little bit more specifically about the Climate Action Partnership and its approach, and how can companies join if they're interested?
Yep, yeah, happy to. And thanks to New Hope, the Climate but hopefully y'all can hear me. But,
Just yell.
yeah, I'll speak loudly. Yeah, UNFI, as you said, we play a unique role in that we're a distributor and essentially a key link between our network of 30,000 suppliers and our 10,000 suppliers. Thank you. Does this work?
In a second.
Well, in short, yes, we are a link between our network of suppliers and our retail customers. And we're also one of the few distributors with a validated science-based target. So it is very important for us to be engaging our network of suppliers on our shared value chain emissions. So to that end, yeah, several years ago we launched the UNFI Climate Action Hub and the Climate Action Partnership Programs. This is in essence how we provide resources and rewards to our suppliers to both help them on their journey wherever they may be on their climate journey, but also to reward and promote those who are doing the work to decarbonize. So on the resources side, our Climate Action Hub website hosts a number of resources. We have a climate action guide for businesses, several series of webinars that delved into a number of topics like measurement, setting a target, implementing the activities in your plan, and ultimately disclosing them, where we're bringing in practitioners, industry experts. And we also have commissioned case studies, in partnership with the Climate Collaborative and some of our leading suppliers who are doing innovative work on one of these topics. Also on the website, one that we published recently was with Organic Valley and their insetting program, where they're in essence working with their member owners to implement practices on farm to reduce emissions. So sharing best practices, lessons learned from that. Those are on the resources side. On the rewards side, the Climate Action Partnership Program is where we recognize and promote the suppliers who are doing that work. So recognition, on our website, social media. If you are at a UNFI selling show, we can promote that at your booth. We have a climate action display case that we'll provide for free on rotation to CAP suppliers, Climate Action Partner suppliers. And then free monthly ads in a monthly specials publication to our natural customers, for instance, where our designers work with brands to help you tell your story around your decarbonizing to our shared customers. 20% of which by sales are retailers who have their own Scope 3 targets. So, our role in that supply chain, as you led with, we're trying to create that throughput between our suppliers doing the work and the customers who are seeking these lower carbon products. To join the program, you need to be a UNFI supplier, and you need to have a registered commitment with one of a number of recognized frameworks. So Science-Based Targets Initiative, SBTi, that's who we have our target with. The Climate Collaborative has a number of relevant target areas for commitments. The Small Medium Enterprise or SME Climate Hub, since we work with a lot of emerging brands. ClimeCo, Climate Neutral Certification. And most recently, we added the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, thanks to Oatly bringing it to our attention. But in essence, if you have a commitment or a certification through one of those and are in good standing, we have a consent form, make it official, and then we can begin activating some of those benefits.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, and I love this example of two organizations so far who are really facilitating movement on Scope 3. And I want to turn to you, Julie, because Oatly sits in a unique position where you're both a supplier to UNFI, and of course you have your own suppliers. You represent Scope 3 emissions for retailers, and you have suppliers who represent your own Scope 3 emissions. So how does Oatly think about value chain partnerships in both directions?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We work in both of those spaces, so I'll take the sort of us being upstream for customers like UNFI and other retailers. Like many companies in this room, we're a company with a mission-driven purpose. Our purpose is to transform the food system into one that benefits both people and planet. And we think about it as that mission helps our customers meet their Scope 3 requirements and commitments. And how does that work? Most recently, Oatly's products were recognized through the initiative that Benjamin just mentioned, the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, as climate solutions, capital C, capital S. These are products that are recognized as replacing higher emission sort of legacy products in the marketplace with lower carbon alternatives. They're products that are essential for decarbonizing our food system and for reaching societal net zero. So what we have found is that most of the mainstream greenhouse gas accounting frameworks don't really account for this potential pathway. They're generally designed for legacy companies that are doing the job of making their footprint less bad, right? And they're not necessarily designed for companies like us that are growing and are providing, doing more good in the world, if you want to say it like that. Growing as a company and working to convert customers to these lower carbon alternatives. But we need more of these, right, to transform the food system. Climate solutions and the companies that produce them need to scale rapidly. So we began working with the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. They have developed a formal framework called the Climate Solutions Framework. It has a set of rigorous criteria, and I won't get into the details here, but just among them to say that your product has to be at least 50% less intensive than the category average of what it is competing against. So for us, that would be the milk space, both dairy and plant. And as that moves to decarbonize over time, we will also have to track that. There are other requirements, and if somebody has questions about that, I'm happy to talk about those. But we're really thrilled that key customers like UNFI, and they're really in the vanguard on this, are starting to accept the Climate Solutions Framework, the work of ERI, as an accepted framework under which we can achieve membership in climate action programs like UNFI's. We're really proud that we just joined that program. And part of what we're doing now is really working to grow awareness that these other frameworks exist and really calling for recognition that companies like us need to be supported on their growth journey and should be recognized for the work that we're doing, bringing climate solutions into the sphere. So that's sort of how we're approaching that piece of it. And then I know we'll have some time. Obviously, as a responsible company, we also attend to our own upstream Scope 3, and I think at another moment in this panel, I can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. I think we're going to turn some of the questions to focusing on how do you engage your upstream suppliers and how are each of these organizations supporting companies and organizations in doing that. So Vincent, based on your experience in Supplier Locked, what are the hallmarks of a successful Scope 3 engagement program? And if a company here is considering launching its own initiative, what are the key kind of design principles that they should prioritize in order to be successful?
Yeah, and we think about this a lot within Supplier Locked and also at Guidehouse when we work with many companies on designing programs. I have a very long list, but I would say the combination of clear criteria and communications with suppliers combined with the right level of support goes a very long way. So when we design programs, there's a longer list that you could, for success factors, you could think about. So there are elements like how do you communicate with suppliers, how do you collaborate with them, which incentives could you put in place, which criteria are would resonate with your suppliers, and also monitoring and tracking. So how do you track progress? All elements that I would kind of recommend to have in place when you're designing a supplier engagement program. And then I think a deep dive on your supplier base, and that typically we apply the 80-20 rule, your top 100 suppliers, top 300 suppliers for bigger companies, sometimes top 1,000 suppliers, really looking at which suppliers have the highest greenhouse gas related impact on our Scope 3 footprint, often in category 1 and 2, and then also what is the maturity of their programs. We actually found that if, even based on disclosures, if you look at which program elements are in place, might be as simple as, is there a footprint? Is there a target? Is there an abatement program? Do they have an ESG report? Do they disclose to CDP? by tracking a couple of those elements, you're basically able to pretty easily identify if a supplier has a program in place, yes or no, and then combining their maturity of their program and the impact on your Scope 3 footprint can kind of help you to establish almost like personas of suppliers and how to engage with them. And when a supplier is advanced, I would say you can advance and they have a high impact. You could collaborate with them, establish a partnership to really drive down a significant chunk of emissions together, invest together, might be more time investment. And then for a middle group where you could see emissions are important, but not the highest, and the programs are not really advanced, that is where I think you could think about what type of support at scale could be delivered to suppliers. And by going through this design process time and time again, we developed the Supplier Locked initiative to basically take the suppliers by the hand, really collaborate with them to build maturity in their climate program. So those are just a couple of things that come to mind related to that question.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And the theme that I'm hearing throughout is not just asking of something from your suppliers, but providing them with the key resources they needed in order to meet that ask. And I think we're going to continue to hear that as a theme throughout these responses. So Benjamin, from your perspective, where do companies typically get stuck in their Scope 3 reduction efforts? Vincent just laid out a number of great principles for developing a Scope 3 program. What are some of the pitfalls or the pain points that you see, and how is UNFI working to tackle some of those challenges?
I think it depends in part on where you're at in your journey. If you're just starting and the act of measuring and trying to get a sense of what that footprint is not it's not immaterial. So if you think about it on the front end, just establishing a baseline, but also if you're responding to downstream customer requests, if you're disclosing your emissions in an impact report, this is probably not a one-time exercise. It's probably annual and ongoing. So I would say one of the challenges is just the effort involved with doing the measurement, in part because we're talking about something that's inherently indirect by definition. It's your Scope 3. You're probably drawing from a number of data systems with varying quality, but maybe more importantly is this effort in a world where we have finite time could be taking away from your resources and the work of actually planning and implementing the reduction activities. So that's a real challenge that's worth naming. But I'll say too, the importance of measuring is not to be understated. Without doing it in some of the ways Vincent was describing, you won't know what the hotspots are, where the most material emission sources are, and thus what are the right interventions? What's going to have the most ROI on the expenditures to actually make said reductions? So to the extent that, UNFI is aware of this and trying to support our suppliers to that end, one, we've been intentional about that with the resources on our Climate Action Hub and bringing in, practitioners who can share their best practices in addressing that. But I'll say there's also a recognition by UNFI for the need that we have to improve our own Scope 3, but also the type of support that we extend to our suppliers. So we recently launched a partnership with How Good. They're a technology provider specialized in food and ag. They include sustainability insights, Scope 3 among them. And we're excited for this because in part it will allow UNFI's calculation and measurements to be a lot more representative and actionable. But maybe more importantly, it allows us to extend free access to a light version of their platform for folks, again, wherever they're at on their journey. If you've not done the measurement before, you can create a free account. You'll have pre-populated in it those products that we distribute. And with some nominal inputs, you can create custom product carbon footprints, which are typically fairly expensive, but are really important in in understanding those hotspots and having more nuanced insights. For UNFI, you know, we think that it's important to bring value back to our suppliers if we're going to be working with them in the ways described. And I know that the Align Sustainability Reporting Initiative is on the agenda later today, so I'll put a plug in for that. I think it's in the afternoon, and I won't speak to it much here, but it's relevant in the sense that UNFI, we're a member of the working group. And I mean, the things that I'm hearing from others in that forum definitely resonate in these challenge areas. Like, if I'm doing this measuring and reporting, you know, it feels like it's going into a black box, or like I'm not sure what it's in service of. I'm not getting much value back in it. So I say all this, you know, just to kind of reiterate that for UNFI, it was really important for us in choosing a partner and an approach to working with our suppliers and around measurement in particular to create a way where we can provide value back to suppliers. So again, enhancing their understanding of their own emissions, but also enabling UNFI to be a better partner and helping to differentiate your products to our shared customers based on those custom product carbon footprints, and to, you know, help us get that throughput to our customers who are looking for lower carbon goods.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Julie, I want to turn to you and hear a little bit about your own upstream programs. Oli has developed programs to help their suppliers or farmers reduce their climate emissions. Can you tell us a little bit about how those programs are structured and what results you've seen so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're an oat milk company. Hopefully folks in the room know that. So for us, the vast majority of our Scope 3 impact comes in our oat supply chain. And so that is where we focus much of our time. It's the work that I've been doing for the last 4 years or so at the company. We have a pretty aggressive regenerative agriculture sourcing target and have designed an initiative to partner not only with the farmers who produce the oats, but very importantly with the mills. So we don't have a direct sourcing supply chain. We buy our oats, kilned oats from oat mills. And they have become really, really essential partners in the program that we've designed. So it's a bit of like a triangular partnership, and it works very well. The program is designed, of course, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with oat agriculture. It is also designed to support ecosystem health and nature positive outcomes, and has elements also of supporting farmers and farm viability and farmer community resilience. So it's meant to be a pretty holistic program. I think some of the elements of it that I'd call out for the audience is this co-design that I've mentioned. It is different in Canada than it is from Sweden than it will be in some of our other supply sheds. We have gone and spent a lot of time having conversations with our oat mills and the producers who produce for them to make sure that the technical specifications are appropriate to that region. It is, I'll talk about this probably a little bit later. I mean, we pay, obviously, for farmers to participate in it. We pay for practice adoption on an acreage basis. We pay for them to contribute data. We pay for people to contribute their knowledge. I mean, so there's definitely equity in the system. But I also want to just mention, equally important is the work that we've done to develop collaboration and partnership inside the company. And this is often where companies get hung up, is that you have a procurement team who's on a mission to make sure you can get, the goods that you need on the time and at the price that you need them. And then you have sustainability targets. And to be honest, they don't always integrate, especially if you're a larger, sort of a more complex company. So one thing that we spent a lot of time on last year was actually workshopping together with our procurement team on the setting of the targets that Oatly will now have to reach 100% acreage equivalent sourcing volume for our oats. It's on a mass balance measurement scale, but deciding together basically how to roll that out, both in terms of scale in any one supply shed and then over the diversity of the supply sheds that the company sources from. And I think that that's just an equally important piece of work, and I'm highlighting that because I think it doesn't always get talked about, and it's definitely not glamorous. You asked me, I think, a little bit about what we're seeing so far. So this is year 3 of our work in our Canadian supply shed. We'll be at about 5,000 acres, which is roughly, I think, 17% equivalent of our supply. So it's not an insignificant number. I'm also really just pleased to share that we're doing year 1 in Sweden this year. So we're launching it this year with our mill partner in Sweden. So that's an exciting milestone. And then Benjamin mentioned working with data providers. In his case, HowGood. We have 2 really great technology support partners. One here for our North American work, that's Regrow. They're probably in the room. Another company that we work with in Sweden, Improven. And this year, for the first time, both of those technology and data providers have enabled us to have customized emissions factors for our supply sheds that we're using in our greenhouse gas accounting. It's been 4 years in the making, and that's a pretty big milestone. So those are some of the highlights I would share.
That's huge, and I think a lot of companies are looking for that really detailed data, and so to hear that you've been able to achieve that with those partners is really encouraging.
Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about incentives and what incentives you've seen work effectively for suppliers and engaging in your upstream. And Julie, you just mentioned a little bit about paying your suppliers to participate in that program. I want to turn back to you, see if there's anything else you want to share about incentives for upstream, and then we'll just kind of come down the line here.
Yeah, I'll actually mention both upstream and downstream, because again, we sort of, as a brand, we're in this unique kind of middle position of being somebody else's scope 3 and then having our own scope 3. So I mentioned financial incentives. I think sometimes they're obvious to us and we don't say it enough. We pay farmers to take the journey and to share the risk of the regenerative agriculture transition. Hopefully that goes without saying, but sometimes it doesn't go without saying, so I'm saying it. So yeah, that's risk sharing, that's data sharing, that's practice adoption. Some other incentives, obviously there's the market that we offer. This year we've just started collaborating with our mill and a couple of other brands to also provide technical support. Obviously farming in a regenerative way is different from the way that many farmers were trained, and so providing technical assistance providers is another element of how we incentivize, make sure that people want to work with us on this program. And then just because I have to. Downstream, I mean, obviously we're making these investments as a brand, and so it would be wonderful if our customers then recognize the effort that we're putting in and provide ways to showcase our work, highlight it. Obviously joining Climate Action Partnership is one example of that, but like we're doing the work, we're driving these products that contribute to societal net zero, and so we just think it would be great if more retailers and distributors kind of showcased and haloed the companies that are making these investments.
Yeah, so it's something we thought about a whole lot in the design of our program. So at first we had an incentive which was the achievement of a silver, a gold, and a bronze level program, climate program, but it was kind of complex to match that with elements of a climate program for suppliers. So we came up with a system where after each achievement step, we have 6 in total, suppliers get a badge. And it has actually worked quite well for suppliers to use that in their communications. In their communications with their counterparts at corporations, sharing that they have certain elements of their climate program in place. For instance, they complete a scope 1 and 2 footprint, they get the scope 1 and 2 badge, and then they can tell their category manager, look, we're participating actively in Supplier Locked, we've completed all our activities, we have a scope 1 and 2 footprint now. So it really helped to simplify part of the interaction between the category manager and the supplier. And then the whole program, we've kind of developed it as a incentive or an reward. So when suppliers enroll and get enrolled by companies, they get access to our learning platform, they get access to 5, it's not in person, but trainings led by people, remote on each of the topics we cover. It includes the unlimited opportunity to ask questions by email, and we also introduced office hours. Or we call it office hours, but it basically means when suppliers have questions, they can come to our meetings and ask questions. And last thing I will say about this, it's kind of funny how we developed this, because we early on in the program we gave the suppliers homework, but it was more like, look, this is the homework you could complete in order to develop your program. Well, then all of a sudden, at scale, we started getting back homework assignments for us to look at, and ultimately that led to kind of that badging system and all the criteria per topic. So that is just a little bit of thinking related to incentives from my side.
Thanks.
Let me echo, what we've already heard, both on this panel, but even I would say in the first one with Luke, and I think Simple Mills representative. But before joining Unify, I was, working as a verifier of corporate climate claims, as a project developer for these insetting programs, and I would echo this need for, cost share. Most of the emissions reside within the farm gate if we're talking about the food system. And farmers, cannot and I would say shouldn't be expected to fully bear that cost. That was very central to kind of the theory of change in that chapter of my career, where we were trying to, create a way for downstream entities to credibly claim, the reductions associated with the implementation of those practices, and then the funnel funds back to, to the farmer to help offset it. So, in my current capacity at Unify, I've helped to kind of direct some of our resources through corporate giving, the Unify Foundation, its grant making and impact investing, but to, in essence, help sponsor some of these joint supply chain projects. We had our impact report come out in January, and we speak a little bit in there to a project even with a Unify customer and a supplier, where we were doing just that all the way up to the farm gate, helping to implement some of these practices. That being said, that's not our primary lever for providing incentives or achieving kind of our targets for Scope 3, if only because of the breadth of our network of suppliers, 10,000 of them, or the 250,000 SKUs that we distribute. So, we're thinking more expansively about incentives and very much through kind of that lens of how can we increase the value proposition of what it means to be a Unify climate action partner. So, discussed the resources and some of the existing rewards earlier. But for us, we were very intentional about thinking, okay, well, what further value and support can we give to suppliers? So the partnership with How Good, as referenced, is one way in which we can begin activating that. But I'm really excited to, I think, be a partner in the ways Julie was describing too, where we have shared customers, and we're one step closer in some ways as a distributor. So how can we be not just an extension of your physical distribution network, but also help to tell your story and relay that information to the customers who care, including but not limited to that 20% who have corporate commitments, because Unify definitely has customers who are smaller independents, but who have aligned customers who themselves would be interested in knowing that within our assortment, some goods are lower carbon compared to others, and that's something that Unify is investing in our capabilities to provide, and therefore, be a way to provide the incentive to the folks who are doing the work, creating that throughput, ideally helping to increase sales, market share, et cetera.
Yeah. I heard in each of your responses talking both about incentives to your upstream and then also the sharing of data between both upstream and yourself, and then downstream as well. So I want to talk a little bit about data, because I think that's a huge challenge for a lot of folks. And just a little bit of a time check, we're going to do Q&A in about 10 minutes. So just for my panelists to keep that in mind. So data collection, it's a really big challenge with Scope 3 engagement. And then you just talked a little bit about that data collection using How Good. could you talk a little bit more, and then we'll kind of go on down the line, how you're currently collecting data from suppliers, if there's anything else you want to say on that, and what strategies have you seen that have been most effective in that?
Sure. Well, I'll say to date, we've not used How Good yet to collect data, and the request to our suppliers for emissions-related data has been pretty limited. We disclose our emissions both in our impact report, but also with CDP as a third-party disclosure platform, and piloted an offering they had for the last few years to collect emissions-related data from a very small subset of our suppliers. So that's been our experience to date. I will say kind of, one thing that we were looking for relative to the strategy I've been describing was both an approach and a solution that went a bit further and provided, like actionable sustainability insights and value both to ourselves and to suppliers that we would, be engaging around on data. So that very much informed kind of our assessment of the ecosystem of technology providers. To be sure, as I said, we landed with How Good based on the functions we were looking for, our product requirements. But I'll say like there are a good number of viable solutions out there. Based on our assessment, like they're all aligned with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol from a corporate inventory standpoint. But even from like the product carbon footprint level, saw many of them being able to, allow for data transferability because they were all PACT compliant, or Partnership for Carbon Transparency. It was through that lens we were very much assessing, these new solutions and what would work for us. And I think it's important in terms of securing, supplier participation in that, like, there's going to be a diversity of tools out there, making sure that they're interoperable, that we can leverage. I mean, for instance, the work that you've already done in establishing an LCA and understanding of Oatly's carbon intensity, like being able to ingest that into our tool of choice was something we definitely needed, because we need to scale the participation across all of our suppliers, knowing some will be maybe doing this work themselves for the first time when engaging with us, and others are more advanced but wanting to leverage that work.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think those points are spot on. I think a lot of the time we invest is basically helping suppliers to start using certain tools. So we just established a pilot specifically for the natural products and supply chain context with How Good as well. And then where we come in as supplier locked is a lot of education on like what is a life cycle assessment, what is a product carbon footprint, how do you build these up, and where do you find the right data for all the elements of your products. So I would say we're kind of technology agnostic. What I just mentioned relates more to the agricultural context, and then in other sectors we work with other data related companies. But really, for us, it's spending just a lot of time with the suppliers to step by step, not too fast, kind of talk about what the components are of the data. And that's relevant for developing the product footprint and also for developing their corporate footprint, also for establishing a target, also a lot of data, even forward-looking data needed. And then when they develop their abatement programs, there's a whole additional data need, like which energy audits have taken place, are there any insights in which technical measures within the organizational boundaries can be implemented. So I would say we spend a lot of time on the data topic, and for us the personal approach to that and also not going too fast has shown a lot of success.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. I mentioned that we have data support partners for our agriculture program. They are collecting data for us at supply shed level. That's very important for us, both for the emissions factors that I mentioned, and also in at least one case, we're performing a sort of ROI analysis on the abatement potential of different practices so that we know how to tweak our program so that we're getting the most impact for the action. And then on the other side, on Oatly as a upstream for our suppliers, we have an in-house team that does product level climate footprints and comparative LCAs. I think we were the first national brand, I think, to have climate footprints for all of our products. And that we make that data available and enter into other, our suppliers' data systems when that's needed to help them calculate how we benefit their Scope 3.
That's great. Yeah, there's a huge amount of data involved in each of your jobs and your industries, and I think it's good to hear some examples of how you're managing it. Real quickly, maybe 1.5 minutes each. What's next for you in this work, and how do you see the Scope 3 landscape evolving in the next few years? So, Vincent, maybe we'll start with you here.
Well, I think we have the basics in place for helping suppliers to develop their broader climate program, data processing, and for us, next is going to be really implementation focused, both abatement, so meaning actual projects to bring emissions down, and we're working on launching an abatement hub where suppliers can find vendors to move their measures more towards implementation, and then also implementation on product embodied emissions, what we talked quite a bit about already. So I would say implementation.
That's great. Benjamin, how about you?
I would say for Unify, it's a very much a test and iterate approach to the strategy around, helping our suppliers differentiate based on their climate action. Just later this week, we're hosting a small summit with some of our key stakeholders where we're going to be talking further about this strategy, trying to validate it, ensure that it, is win-win, what needs to be true in order for it to, be so. But I'm, excited to be doing that this upcoming year. We'll for sure continue kind of the same leveraging of our corporate giving, the foundation's work for other joint supply chain projects. I think for the landscape, I don't see the need for measurement or disclosing going away, whether it's voluntary or regulatory. But I'm hoping that momentum carries forward. I see a need for the industry to kind of evolve in the sense that we consider Scope 3 more than just an accounting exercise, though, and we use it as an actual tool to inform, okay, what does this look like in our other business functions, procurement or otherwise. It's going to be necessary for us to, from a business standpoint, go beyond it as just that. And I'd be remiss not to, call out the work that Oatly, for instance, and putting the carbon intensity on PAC. I would say there's a need for us to, start thinking about carbon, climate, decarbonization as an attribute. So whether that's a model to be replicated or just, inspiration to be drawn from, to scale Scope 3 action, it needs to become more of the mainstream. So that's how I'm hoping the landscape will evolve.
Yeah, that's perfect. Cue it up for you, Julie, to close us out.
Yeah, I think maybe I'll say 3 quick things. On our turning our lens upstream, I think the next big piece of work is how to bring these regenerative agriculture programs to landscape scale through whole farm approaches. We heard that on the prior panel, shared supply sheds, and figuring out how different companies can work together to offtake the crops in the rotation and have a single system that farmers can participate in. I think that's a huge piece of work. Related to that, I think, is bringing nature and climate strategies for companies closer together so that it's one thing, because it is one thing. On the downstream, obviously I mentioned our partnership with the Exponential Roadmap Initiative. We'll be going out trying to socialize that climate solutions framework as much as we can. Again, drawing attention to companies that are offering climate solutions and advocating that they have their place at the climate table and need to grow, need to be rewarded for the contribution they're making to net zero. And then, that involves the work that I alluded to, which is that as the category average of any sector decarbonizes over time, if you want to stay as a climate solution, you have to do your own work to maintain your 50% delta. And so we'll continue to do that in our own company, and then, put those climate labels on the packages and make sure people know, where we stand compared to competitors in the market.
Yeah, that's great. We have some time for questions. Great, the mic is up, so if you could just raise your hand, someone will come to you with the mic.
Hi there. So imagine yourself as at the product creation phase. So you're in the ideation step. You know you have a list of ingredients. You know you need to find a co-packer. You know you need to find a bottler. You know you need to find all of these steps. How do you go about choosing the ingredients, the suppliers, the packagers from that stage of we're just getting started to make sure that you're able to keep this idea at the forefront of your company's ethos as you're moving forward?
It's a great question. Does one of you want to take that?
I'm raising my hand as though I have the most to say on it, and I don't. I mean, to be sure, UNFI, we have some owned brands. Don't work on that team, but you know, what you're saying does resonate though, because when I work with them on a number of topics, like, yes, you are working with a co-packer, and sometimes you are limited by, you know, the options available to them. But I've also learned from our Brands Plus team, you know, it is opening the conversation for, I'm going to draw from like RSPO certified material. You know, we have a corporate commitment to that end. And, you know, they worked with our existing partners to understand, okay, like, this is an ingredient we're interested in. Is it available today? If not, what would it look like to get there? So in that small way, you know, like it was, you know, one brand working within the realities, you know, as kind of you're describing as your set. But you know, if you know what you want, that is the starting point to see what is available. And you know, maybe they're hearing it for the first time, and you're helping them to understand that there's a new market opportunity and interest in, you know, from an ingredient perspective, packaging or otherwise, that having a lower carbon option is of interest.
Julie, was there something you wanted to share?
Yeah, I think that's a terrific question. I think, you know, we picked oats for a reason, right? So one maybe piece of advice I would have is like choose an ingredient that you know is going to contribute to, you know, a core ingredient that you know is going to contribute to the goals that you have. Our company founders picked oats because they knew that it was a low carbon and nutritious option compared to other things that were in the milk space. And then I think having, I mean, this maybe goes without saying, but having supplier codes of conduct, supplier standards, making sure that your co-manufacturers and your suppliers can meet them, not all of them can, and then having a strategic conversation about whether or not your co-man or your packaging provider or your ingredient supplier is willing to like go on the journey with you and to have a shared set of perhaps climate or other sustainability goals. I think having those conversations in the beginning is a good move.
I have a question about your climate solutions framework. It sounds a little bit like what I've heard about Scope 4. How do you envisage that your customers downstream will account for the reductions? Will that be an inset or an offset, or how do you think that's going to work?
Yeah. I'll do my best to answer the question. I do think it's important to say it's not our climate solutions framework. It is the Exponential Roadmap Initiative's climate solutions framework, which we have joined and have been like certified by them as meeting the criteria. So I just want to make sure that that's clear in the room. Yeah, we've talked a lot about Scope 4, handprint, displaced, avoided emissions, however you want to call that. And I don't know that there's like an answer yet. I think we're going to continue to publish the climate footprint of our products, but you're probably also going to be seeing us talk more and more about the role that we're going to have in societal net zero, you know, and the way in which kind of converting people from higher carbon alternatives to lower carbon alternatives creates like a societal delta that also needs to be recognized. Exactly how we're going to do that, I don't know yet.
Yeah, and interesting that you bring it up. I think it's actually a topic that we see emerging a whole lot more again. I think avoided emissions or enabling effects of products was very popular maybe a decade ago, and especially in the last year I've heard a whole lot about it again. And I think you're onto something. Like if you can really establish the environmental benefits of your product for your customers, I think there can be a lot of value in that. And recently we've been looking a lot at what are customers most interested in. And sometimes if that would be emissions, or you just show them an emissions number, it can still raise a lot of questions. So I would say specifically related to this topic, the underlying drivers like the energy that you have saved versus a baseline, or the fuel, or different practices that you've implemented. Like if that data within the calculations is very transparent, I think that might really resonate with customers.
I've got the microphone here, so I get to ask the next question. My name is Jonathan Kaplan. I'm with Effecterra. We're a sustainability consulting firm helping some of your suppliers do their carbon footprints and figure out their goals and action plans. One challenge we're having is that the bar has been set very high for documenting carbon sequestration. Regenerative farmers and ranchers provide a lot of value in terms of pulling carbon back down and getting it into the soil or into the trees. And yet the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, the European Environmental Product Footprint Guidelines set a very high bar in terms of having direct data, statistical significance, ongoing monitoring, et cetera. How are you wrestling with that? What do we do here?
Yeah, that's a great question.
You're in some ways almost giving me PTSD from when I was on the technical working group for the land sector removal guidance draft, and that was 2 years ago, and we still have, last I heard, expecting the final to come out later this year, which is all to say, completely empathize with what you're laying out. Also acknowledge the core importance of removals as one of the ways in which the food and ag sector can help reduce our impact. But we're working towards submitting our own flag target later this year. We're seeing where the dust will settle, but right now, working with what is known, and for a number of those joint supply chain projects, for instance, like there's plenty of work to be done in reductions in the short term, and I'll probably allude to this. Well, I'll just say now. I mean, the importance to acting now is probably not lost on anybody in this room. So, yes, there's uncertainties from an accounting perspective around removals and the high bar that is set, but like that can't stymie us from taking the actions we know need to happen regardless.
Either of you want to share anything? Okay. I think we've got time for one last question.
My question, I think, goes to Julie, big Oatly fan, me and my kids. It's our breakfast ritual. But you mentioned something I think that's really important, which is around you'd like consumers to better understand all the work that you're doing. How is Oatly going about that? Because there is a huge value action gap of people that say they want to align their dollars to their values, but so few brands out there are actually spending the money investing in to educate people about that. Are there ideas that Oatly is pursuing to help better inform them?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think it's this, you're pointing to something essential, which is that if, at the end of the day, if the end consumer does not understand the difference, then all the work that you have done is not having the impact in the world that you would like it to have, right? So, I mean, certainly our company is known for being a pretty loud voice in this space. And some of you might, for example, have caught a few years ago, we did these double billboards where we bought out space in major metropolitan areas and had like our climate footprint on one side and like an empty space where we were offering space for like the dairy equivalent to show their numbers too, so that consumers could compare those. So there's like cheeky ways of kind of raising that bar. But like more and more, we're also having the sort of, I don't want to say serious conversations, but we're also talking with our retail partners and our customers about what can they do in store, like in-store advertising, priority shelf placement, we'd love an end cap, ways to showcase purpose-driven brands, regenerative brands, climate solutions brands. So I think it's going to have to be in partnership. We're going to keep our voice loud, and then I think that's where the work that we're doing, sort of along the chain to like reinforce and keep magnifying that message. I also know, of course, that like not every consumer buys on this basis, and so you also have to provide a great product right at the end of the day, which, as your family knows, we also do.
All right, we've got time for just some very quick closing remarks, maybe 20, 30 seconds from each of you. How would you like to wrap this up? We'll start with Benjamin and we'll go on down the line.
I mean, what I more or less said in the response to the question, but like, you know, we need to be doing the work of actually decarbonizing in addition to call it measurement or updating our abatement plans. You know, these aren't linear processes. They should be, you know, feeding back into each other. But yeah, just reiterate the importance of doing multiple things in tandem.
Doing the work, I love that. Thank you. Vincent.
Yeah, I think designing a program where you really think about your suppliers' needs, potentially a personal touch or a lot of personal interaction when possible are major elements of a successful Scope 3 program, and also very clear communications on what you would like for them to prioritize and work on with you.
Thanks. Julie?
Sort of what I was saying in reference to the last question. Find ways to reward companies that are doing this work. We're climate solutions or we're purpose-driven companies. Reward us, buy us. Ask your retailers to buy everybody who's in this space, because we're not just doing less bad in the world, we're doing more good.
It's a great note to end on. Thank you very much. Really wonderful group of panelists today. I really appreciate your effort. Thank you.
This was fun.
So we are now going to take a lunch break. We'll start back up in this room at 11:45 for the afternoon programming. During the lunch break, you can visit the resource fair and art exhibit, which is open just next door in the Marquee Ballroom, Northeast Northwest. So make sure to stop over and check out our partner organizations. And we've got a great lineup of folks that are available and excited to chat with you. So thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you.